There is a lot of rhetoric going around right now about Donald Trump becoming a dictator if he gets reelected in November. Even though they said this in 2016 and then again in 2020, during his 4 years in the White House, Trump never did anything that made him seem like a dictator. And I'm not talking about sending mean tweets and calling CNN and MSNBC reporters fake news. I'm saying we never saw Trump do any of the things that are all the characteristic traits of fascist dictators. But Joe Biden is another story. I'm going to talk in this video about some of the things that Biden has done over the last 3 years that absolutely puts him in line with many 20th century dictators. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back. So Nikki Haley was recently on Meet the Depressed, where the anchor asked her if she believed if Donald Trump were reelected, would he follow the Constitution? It's an absurd question. But Haley should have answered by saying, that's a despicable question, and you have absolutely no evidence that he wouldn't, despite a joke he made when answering Sean Hannity on his show.
No, I think Bedlam is Joe Biden. I think that he's using this. This is just a political ploy. Trump is a dictator. He wants to be a dictator. You know, it's interesting. I did a show, Sean Hannity. Did you ever hear of him? He's a very nice man. And he said, essentially, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? Tell me. I think he was trying to give me a nicer question that maybe you guys would. He meant it very well. I said, I'm going to be a dictator for one day. We're going to do two things. The border, we're going to make it so tight you can't get in unless you come in legally. And the other is energy. We're going to drill, baby, drill. After that, I'm not going to be a dictator. After that, I'm not going to be a dictator.
But Haley didn't do that. She took the bait because she's a political whore who thinks that she can beat Joe Biden if she ever gets past Donald Trump. Give it a listen.
Do you think Donald Trump would follow the Constitution if he were elected to a second term?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you always want to think someone will.
I mean, my God, guys. You know, it's bad enough when we have to watch the sad sack Nikki Haley taking the bait to trash Trump with lies about him becoming a dictator and not following the Constitution. But what gets me is that we already do have a dictator in the White House right now, and no one, not one single solitary fake news reporter or rhino, has ever asked about his dictatorship. You know, in its 200-year history, the Democratic Party has rarely ever done something good. From slavery to the relocation of Indians to reservations, to abortion, to supporting child mutilation, the party has said that these things were morally good, even when they were indefensible. But now we have an actual dictator in the White House from the Democratic Party. Joe Biden is a fascist dictator. It is so obvious that when we hear lefties say, vote for Biden to save democracy, it is so out of place that your brain snaps. You have to wonder how these people could be so ignorant and who ties their shoes for them in the morning. Let's go over some of the things that Joe Biden has done that puts him in league with lefty favorites like Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, and Mao Zedong. Joe Biden has abused his power to target journalists, politician activists, and concerned parents. Biden's DOJ just recently arrested a Blaze Media journalist, Steve Baker, for doing journalism at the Capitol on January 6th. He was there with his camera and a notebook, and he was doing some reporting. But he didn't say that they were insurrectionists in his story, so they arrested him. He has a First Amendment right to act as a member of the press, but the Biden dictatorship arrested him. Biden went after parents who complained to their school boards. You remember that? They complained to school boards during school board meetings, which is where they have the right to complain. And they complained that they don't want their children being taught sexual perversions in the classroom. And they don't want the school to teach their kids how to become racists with critical race theory. Now, I don't care what you think of those two items. That's why the parents complained after their kids came home from school and told the parents what their teachers were teaching them in school. Biden's DOJ started case files on those parents. They lied about it when first asked, but it was discovered later on that they did start files on the parents and were going to question them prior to arresting them. But they dropped the whole thing when there was so much overwhelming outrage by the country. Now, don't forget, in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, defeated Terry McStupid in the governor's race after McStupid said that parents have no right to tell the schools what to teach their children, and Youngkin supported the parents. To everyone who called Trump a dictator, just remember this. A dictator cannot be censored. The leader doing the censoring is the dictator, and that includes the fascist dictator Joe Biden, who got Twitter and other social media platforms to censor Trump and anyone who thinks like him. Those MAGA extremists that we keep hearing about. Folks, one of the definitions of a fascist is a government leader who uses private sector companies to do their dirty work for them because they can't do it themselves, being a part of the government. What Joe Biden and his administration did to censor free speech to anyone who said anything against democratic policies is the very definition of fascism. One of the special characteristics of fascists throughout history was to silence their opponents. Censorship in the town square, or the new arena of ideas, if you will, is the very definition of fascism. They can't beat their opponents in the arena of ideas, so they silence them and claim victory that way. Joe Biden is a fascist dictator. Within days of being inaugurated, Biden signed 37 executive orders. That was 33 more than the guy he recently called a dictator, Donald Trump. And try to tell me a dictator wouldn't do this. Joe Biden came up with a vaccine mandate to force American citizens to take experimental medicine or they would lose their jobs and livelihoods. Many states, cities, and even corporations followed along because they were sheep. Either that or they were terrified of what the regime would do to them if they didn't. Joe Biden knew that he could not forgive student loan debt on the backs of the American taxpayers who did not sign up for those loans and never experienced the fruit of them. He knew from the very beginning that he did not have the authority to do that. Nancy Pelosi even went on to say to Congress that the president does not have the power to forgive student debt. Only Congress does.
People think that the president of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
But Joe Biden did it anyway. I guess he too had a phone and a pen. But then the Supreme Court heard the case brought against Biden and ruled that he was not allowed to do it. But then Biden said, screw that, I'm going to do it anyway. Biden did that to get votes from young voters who had student loan debt. If someone removes your student loan debt and you have no conscience about who has to pay for it other than you, then sure, you would vote for that person. To violate a Supreme Court ruling and to continue the activity he was told was unconstitutional makes Joe Biden a dictator. Joe Biden shut down the Keystone Pipeline and the 11,000 full-time and temporary jobs that went with it. He did it during a pandemic where jobs for Americans were already at a premium. A dictator would do that. Because of Biden's executive orders that shut down our energy sector, gasoline prices rose to all-time highs in most states. The Democrats couldn't have that during the run-up to the 2022 midterm elections, so Biden released oil from our strategic petroleum reserve to artificially lower the price of gas at the pump, to fool the American people into thinking, Joe's got it going on. Our strategic petroleum reserve is supposed to be for our military in case a war breaks out. A dictator would do that. What's far worse is that Biden sold over 7 million barrels of that oil from our strategic petroleum reserve to the communist Chinese. Yes, he did that. Part of the 37 executive orders Joe Biden signed right away concerned our immigration and border policies. Joe Biden has ignored our immigration laws since day one. He took an oath of office to defend and protect the people of America and the Constitution, and he has been derelict in his duties since day one. Only a dictator would blatantly defy his constitutional duties like that to the harm and detriment of his own people. How come CNN and MSNBC never asked Biden about that? Another common trait of fascist dictators is they have their political opponents imprisoned. Joe Biden has had Donald Trump arrested and charged with bogus crimes that he knows he did not commit. The Biden administration has gone after political enemies like there's no tomorrow. Yes, They arrested Trump for crimes he did not do, but that Joe Biden himself did. Only in a dictatorship would courts and the police investigators go along with something like that. Only in a dictatorship would they go after a political enemy of the ruling party while ignoring the things they accuse the enemy of doing that their own leader did. Here's something you may not be familiar with. Just 3 weeks before the 2020 election, Joe Biden was on with Georgie Stephanopoulos. And he said, I have this strange notion we are a democracy. If you can't get the votes, you can't legislate by executive order unless you're a dictator. We're a democracy. We need consensus. He said this on ABC News. Give it a listen.
So there's not going to be any delay on the tax increases?
No, well, I got to get the votes.
Listen.
I got to get the votes. That's why, the one thing that I have this strange notion. We are a democracy. Some of my Republican friends and some of my Democratic friends even occasionally say, well, if you can't get the votes by executive order, you're going to do something. Things you can't do by executive order unless you're a dictator. We're a democracy. We need consensus.
That's the thing with communist dictators. They will say anything to get elected, and rarely will they ever say something that the people agree with and follow through after they get the power. All right, guys, smash that like button if you think Joe Biden has ruled as a dictator. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please share our videos with like-minded friends who want to stay informed with what's really going on. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.